welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And this week we're looking at an interesting book. So this is the Freedom Writers Diary. It is, the subtitle is How a Teacher and 150 Teens Used Writing to Change Themselves and the World Around Them. It was written by the Freedom Writers and their teacher, Erin Gruwell. Maybe mispronouncing this. So I believe I have scheduled to watch the film for this, which, if I remember, focuses a little bit too much on the teacher's personal life, as opposed to the book, which doesn't, like, at all. So Erin Gruwell taught briefly. She was only there for 4 years before she left and went to teach college. She was there for 5 years total, because she student taught at this high school, which was in Long Beach, California. This happened around 94 through about 98, because again, 4 years, and basically what happened was she student taught, and she was a very good teacher. She was young, she was energetic, she was putting a lot into teaching, and essentially the older teachers didn't like her because she was young, energetic, and putting a lot into her teaching, and essentially she made them look bad, and they did not like this. It's like, look, we're mediocre teachers and drone on, and you're young and you're making us look bad because you're doing more than we want to, because essentially I'm guessing a lot of them were burnt out, so, and refusing to leave their jobs because benefits. Not understandable, but again, they're crappy teachers that are getting mad because somebody's young and more energetic than they are, and again, putting more into it. So after her student teaching, she chose to teach. She was offered a position at this school, and as revenge in many ways, she was an English teacher. They gave her the rejects. So in this school in Long Beach, a lot of the kids were bused in or came by bus from worse neighborhoods with gang violence and drugs and pretty much the projects in a lot of areas. So pretty much the worst of LA. So, and not Louisiana here, we're talking Los Angeles, California. So this is essentially, and they're in a school which also have a lot of white upper class. Now, a lot of these kids are African American and Latino. So that's ranging from people who are from Mexico to various places of Central and South America, and possibly even some of the Caribbean islands. And then, of course, you have people who are African American, who, again, originate from the slave trade and may have also come up from various parts of Central and South America. So, and possibly even the Caribbean, which is where their ancestors. The majority of them are poor. So again, she's told basically as a punishment to teach the rejects. And yet she's still a really, really good teacher. So she starts using books and writing to help these kids. And that's what this book is about. You have their diary entries. Now, besides hers as the teacher, she's the only one who is named. They're numbered to keep the anonymity, to prevent the children from basically getting repercussions from a lot of things that they're talking about having this come back to them. Because a lot of these diary entries talk about murder, family members committing murder, rape, molestation. There is one part of the book that's in the beginning where this young girl chooses to be part of this high school sorority, and they're being hazed pretty severely. And there's another one later in the book where there's a girl who's now a senior who had friends who were seniors in that sorority who was part of that sorority but didn't go through as severe hazing. And in her diary entry, which she's a senior, is observing these, what is being done. And it's like, what on earth is this? And why on earth do you want to sacrifice yourself for popularity? And at this point, she's a senior, so this is a different girl. But they go through a lot of different diary entries. So these kids talk about a lot of stuff. They talk about different things. It starts off with them talking more about their personal lives, and as the book goes on, they start talking a lot about what Miss G, as they call her, is doing. A lot of the film, if I remember correctly, and I'm going to review this later, so you will see this on Friday. Again, I haven't watched it yet, so got the book first. Focuses on her reading them the Diary of Anne Frank, which was a minor part, and that was their sophomore year when they did this. They also, and I think the film skips over because they focus so much on the Diary of Anne Frank, they also read another book that was very popular at the time, that I cannot remember, it starts with a Z. It's another diary of a girl who survived, but not in the Holocaust, but about the war in Bosnia, which was going on at the time, which had just happened. And she had a book that came out of her life, starting when I think she was about 11 when the Bosnian War started out, and how she was spent a lot of time hiding in a basement, why people were being killed and raped all around her, and how the kids related to not only Anne Frank because of the violence, but this other young woman, who's, in fact, I'm going to look, there are pictures in here. What is her name? Because they do show pictures. Let's pull that out. Zalita, spelled Z-L-A-T-A. So, in fact, I'll show you some of the pictures. So this is some of their pictures you'll see throughout the book of the Freedom Writers. And, of course, this is, this one, again, this is talking about the Diary of Anne Frank. This is the woman who helped hide Anne and then tried to have her released later. This is the young Bosnian girl. This is Miss G over here, that they also got to meet and they wrote, and this is her again, along with the Freedom Writers. And I think this is her friend. And two young women who, again, survived the Bosnian War. So, and then this is a picture of the Asian gentleman who did he was an entrepreneur, I believe he was a millionaire, and he helped them a lot. He donated a bunch of supplies and things to them because he was inspired by them. So they did a lot of stuff. But most of this book, again, is these diary entries collected by these kids and their teacher about these 4 years of their lives in this classroom and how they came together as a family and how different things happened to them. Some of them became homeless. Some of them talk about rape, murder, how in one entry, the teacher talks about dropping her kids off in their neighborhoods because they're studying late in her classroom, and they're drug dealers, gang members, graffiti, and this area is just absolutely, utterly horrible, and she feels guilty because she goes back home to her safe community in Huntington Beach. So again, this is the early 90s. The beginning of the book talks a little bit about, you have the Rodney King race riots and the LA race riots, and a lot of how they got rid of affirmative action in California at the time, and how they were doing a lot of stuff against immigrants. One of the boys at the very end of the book doesn't really have a great ending. He'd gotten into school, he'd gotten the scholarships, but his father got sick and had to go back to Mexico to get a kidney transplant because he was illegal. And I believe he ends up going to community college. You find more stuff out at the end, in the afterword. But again, it's not all happiness at the end. All of them went to college, either community college or they went on to major universities. And they went through stuff because they didn't have the community that they had. And a lot of them, there are some entries at the end, it's like where they're graduating and it's like, we're scared. We're honestly scared about what's going to happen next. This has been our family. This has been our home. As a lot of them are, we're going off to college for the first time. We're the first person in our family, but some of them are still frightened because, again, they're going off to college for the time. They're the first person in their family. They're escaping, but they're still scared. One of them talks about early in the book how they lie on the stand to protect their own. Or at least they're supposed to, and they don't. Because their mother told them, like, his father spent time in prison because somebody lied on the stand to protect their own. And so he told the truth. He told them that his friend killed this person. They talk about seeing murders and seeing spousal abuse. They talk about child abuse and broken families, and how one moment their family is together and the next it's in pieces. Dad leaves. Mom gets a new boyfriend. The boyfriend's crappy. They get kicked out. It's very true to their lives. So it's a very interesting book. As homeschoolers, it's a good look at, particularly if, say, I thoroughly admit I'm privileged. So is my daughter. She has 2 parents who love her. My husband's an attorney. We both have graduate degrees. Both of us grew up in relatively safe homes. Both of our parents are still married. We never had to worry about food or housing. At least my husband certainly didn't. I didn't know that we were in trouble during a brief period of time, a couple of years when I was a teenager, after we moved. But when my dad was actually struggling to find work at the time. But we never faced the type of violence and risk that these kids do in this book. So it is very enlightening. It's a look at what exists and how these kids talk about one of the reasons they relate to Anne Frank and this other girl who's in Bosnia is because there is a war going on in their cities. Why she's afraid of people just getting shot in the war. Drive-bys are going on in their city. It feels like they're living in a war zone. And this is still true today. So this is still very, very relevant to inner cities in the United States and probably all over the world, particularly in the United States today. We are still having race problems. There is still gang violence. There is still police violence. It's maybe even worse now because of COVID-19. It's a mess. So this is still very relevant to now. And particularly for children like my own daughter, myself, we are white, we are privileged, we thoroughly admit that. It's good for us. And there are white kids that mention it here. So it's not entirely race-based. There are people who talk about that they are white and they're still choosing to be in this class. And some of them are even privileged. And why they don't have horror stories, they're there to support their friends that do. But it is good to see that this side of the world exists. To break that bubble. To not exist within that secure bubble. Now, age range, this is definitely high school. Don't do maybe middle school, not necessarily because of a reading level. This is a really decent, easy reading in the sense that is not complex to read. It's difficult because of the content. It is very broken up. Again, these are diary entries. You get the numbered ones from the students, and then you usually get an introduction, a diary entry from Mrs. G, and how she's talking about sometimes she's struggling. She had to fight to teach them their sophomore or junior, particularly their senior year. She got backed up. She got help from sponsors when it was found out that they had met some of these people, because the Holocaust survivor did come to them. This woman from Bosnia did, in fact, come to see her. Her family helped. And there were other people who volunteered their time to help with these kids. But she talks about how she still struggled. And she was still fighting some of the school administration. And those teachers who were still there, who still hated her, and didn't hate, in fact, possibly hated her even more. Because, again, she was making them look bad. She actually left after those 4 years, and she was offered a position teaching in a university level. So she was teaching education in hopes that she could bring that type of classroom environment to other kids. I don't know how that would work now. One of the reasons we're homeschooling is because of all the testing, and more testing that is going on in the school system these days. But again, this is a really good look to break out of that bubble, particularly for those of us who are privileged, be we white or of different races, to have a look at what was happening in LA in the early 90s. It talks about kids' reaction to Oklahoma City and how that happened and how that affected some of them. Because again, that happened in 95. So it talks about these world events, their world, and what was going on. And again, it's still relevant because these things still happen. These events still happen. And this is a very, very good book about a fantastic teacher and a large group of kids. These kids actually, they still stay together, and they eventually, I think all of them, they did take a trip to Europe after they had graduated. I think after their freshman year in college or something, together, to see some of the places they had read about. And they leave. She started up a foundation called the Freedom Writers Foundation to help more kids. So that's what she's doing. So this is a whole thing. I haven't actually looked at more into that. Maybe I'll mention it when I do the film review. But again, this is a good high school book, particularly if you're looking at the inner cities, if you're trying to teach your kids more about American history, because this is a vital part of American history, because you're looking at urban life in the United States, a lot of times for people in color, kids who are going to different schools, who are coming up to schools that are in a more affluent area. And they're in that mixed environment, which again, they do talk about, because you have the kids who are living in the projects, and then you have the kids who are living in the more affluent areas. So sometimes they're all in the same class. There's some stuff of these kids who left AP classes to go to her class because they feel like they weren't getting into the AP classes, and they didn't feel like anybody got them. And again, she was a very, very good teacher, which was also the reason why some of the other teachers hated her. The school superintendent helped her fight to keep her class together for all 4 years. So, because again, she was low man on the totem pole. And then, of course, she left because it wasn't working. So, fantastic book. Really great read. I wish I'd had more time to read through. Unfortunately, I've actually only had it for about 3 weeks, and I just got back. It took me about 2 days to read through this. I wish I had more time to read through it, because it is very, very good. I highly recommend this book. I am going to review the film. That I haven't watched that. This is being filmed April 6th of 2022. So, I have not watched the film yet. I think I've seen pieces of it with Hilary Swank, is the actress who plays the teacher. So I will review that, maybe add more to what's going on. But great book, definitely high school level, just because of the content. Again, it talks about rape, it talks about molestation, it talks about lots of murder, it talks about sex and drugs and all the stuff these kids are going through. So definitely more mature audiences. And again, they'll get it more when they're high school age. So that is it for this review. I hear my garage door. My husband has gone to yoga. So, great book. Be sure to check out the rest of the channel, like and subscribe. I cover books like this. I cover children's books. I cover picture books. I cover board books on occasion. I cover all sorts of films, be they entertaining or educational. And I do cover some travel stuff, particularly as we get going. That will be added as we get going there. We have a couple up. By the time you see this, we'll have at least 2 Idaho trips up, along with more educational stuff as we get there. My daughter, as of this filming, is 2.5. By the time you guys see this, she'll be 3.5. So, again, like and subscribe. Thank you.